Okay, it's the Monster Man here, and today I wanted to do a tier list of all the comics I read just because thought it would be interesting and a little bit easier, and frankly, I kind of wanted to know what I actually read this year. I thought this would be a fun way to do it. Again, sorry I missed making a video last month. Some life stuff has happened that makes it a little bit harder, and there may be fewer videos in the next month or two. But hopefully I can get back into the groove of things. But anyway, let's get into it. And the order I'm going to go in is basically my purchase order for the year, which I have off to the side, which you don't need to see, I should say. This is all stuff I purchased this year and read this year. That doesn't mean the books came out this year, so I want to specify that. You're going to see a lot of stuff from 2023 and stuff from even earlier. Some of this stuff I have read before and I reread it to make some videos this year. So I decided to include those just because if you've been following the channel, maybe you wanted to see how I rank some of the books I've read and on those videos, and this would be a good way to figure out how much I actually like some of the things I read. Now, if I made a video on it, most likely it's going to be good, but let's just see how this pans out. So the first thing I want to talk about is the first thing I read this year is Bishop War College. Let's see if we can find the picture for that, and I'm going to give this an A tier. So Bishop War College was good. It was a very black-centric story that I could identify with. It's pretty self-contained. You're also going to learn a lot about my tastes here as far as comics go. I really love a self-contained story, which is something you can like pick up and read at any time. The story itself is still going to be like offering you something outside of just the era that it's in, but I think this is a good one that kind of explores Bishop and his relationship to blackness. Again, it is, as I said, a self-contained story. It takes place in the Krakoan era, but doesn't have much to do with a lot of other Krakoan things. So much so that even when Bishop references his War College again, the characters in his War College are not the ones from this story, which is a little funny. So there are some flaws in like a continuity sense. Like there's no continuity issue per se, but just like if you're wondering from the main, Krakoan storyline, where is the rest of his War College? Timeline wise, it's somewhere else. So anyway, all that is to say, for some people, I think this is probably a B tier, but for me, it's a perfect little story. And you know what? We're just going to say that we are going to order this. So next up, we have Wakanda. This one is really good. I might even put it in S tier. And I've kind of given you like my definitions here. I think S tier is a book everyone should read. Wakanda is kind of that. Reading this book was so amazing to me. It made me want more. It made me like almost feel like I was reading a different reality where all comics were kind of like made in Africa. Wakanda is an anthology book where it tells stories about different people in Wakanda, and you see comics written as if they had their own series basically. And it was just an extremely fun read, and it feels very different from what Marvel normally does, because you don't get these black focused books, like these African centered books. And it's really eye-opening when you read it for the first time yourself. And I think a lot of people who do read this probably will experience that. And I definitely think it's something you should see to just broaden your horizons, even if you're not part of the black or African community. And the stories are just cool. They're just good. I remember like one of the standouts, there's like a hero origin story for a guy who gets their like Wakandan tattoos, and his powers are like built from his tattoos, and the girl he's interested in has roots in magic, and I really want to see more from those characters in the future. And I don't know if we'll ever get it because this is from 2023, and I don't think we've gotten a continuation of those stories since, but definitely something to think about. And obviously, as we go further, I'm going to get shorter and shorter with these because there's 56 books, but early on, I wanted to give some detailed explanations so you can kind of feel where my head is out for these rankings. Next up for the year was the Thunderbolts 2022. It is so funny that like the first three books I have like literally three different rankings for. Thunderbolts 2022 is what I would call a non-consequential book. It's just a fun read. There's nothing impactful about it. This is a time that I don't think will be referenced in the future very often. It's really a nothing burger of a comic. It just has Monica Rambeau teaming up with Hawkeye and some other, street level heroes helping out in New York during the time of Luke Cage's when he was mayor. And I think that's the only time it'll be referenced, is in reference to when Luke was mayor. But otherwise, nothing much happens. You could easily skip this. I think I'd only recommend it just if you want to see more stories with these particular characters, because it is a suite of characters that don't get used that often, like Power Man and even America Chavez. I feel like it's maybe underused, or at least when they do use America Chavez, they ruin her. So I don't like her solo series, but we can get into that later. But yeah, that's kind of where I feel like it's good, but you don't need to read it. Nothing to it. Okay, now let's talk about DC Power next. Okay, so DC Power, this one was decent. I think I'm also going to give this a good but not great once I find it. Here we go. So this is the Cultural Anthology series. I do actually read these every year, and I buy just about all of them every year just because I like supporting Black characters. I like seeing them in their own stories. So this one is probably one of the better ones. There are some good stories here with, I think, Bloodwind. Mr. Terrific gets a little tale. I love Mr. Terrific. Thunder Lightning get an appearance. I think the big story in here was the one about Far Sector. I'm not a big fan of the Far Sector, so that brought it down a little bit for me. Maybe if it didn't have such an emphasis on the Far Sector girl, I would have bumped it up. But, you know, this is a personal list, and for me, it was just alright. I don't regret buying it. I think if you have any interest in these cultural anthologies, you won't regret buying it either. So that's where I will leave it. Next up is Marvel vs. Legends, another anthology. These come out around the same time. I buy the DC and the Marvel ones every year. So let's see where I rate this, and let's see if I can find it. So I think I'm going to give that an A. So in this one, we get a really good Deathlock story. We get the return of classic Patriot. If you don't know, I am a huge fan of the Young Avengers. They were very formative into getting me into comics, and Patriot had actually changed a lot over the years from his original version. So seeing Patriot in his classic costume getting into superheroing again was like really awesome. Again, this is a shorter anthology, has a Misty Knight story and a Deathlock story. Deathlock is a really cool character, and they do a lot with him. He's very much like Cyborg, all about the body horror and existential crisis and time travel shenanigans. And I thought his story in here was really cool. And we also get a future T'Challa and Storm series, which I just thought was really sweet, and I love little things like that. It's a shorter book, only 38 pages, but I really enjoyed it for what it is, so I'm going to give it that extra little stamp of approval and put it in the A tier. Now, Agents of Wakanda, that's what comes up next. That's what else the next thing I read this year. This is from 2019, and I'm going to put this into B tier, but high B tier, because it's better than I expected. So I think most people can, once you get kind of into comics, can recognize when a comic probably won't have a big impact. And that is definitely what I expected from Agents of Wakanda. I definitely got it on sale, probably like $3, $4. And I will say it met that expectation. It wasn't a hugely impactful story, but it was well written and very enjoyable, more so than I expected. So actually I will probably bump this up to perfect for me, because it really was like a good read, and I did enjoy the team. I enjoyed how they portrayed T'Challa and his like management skills of being part of the Avengers and managing his own secret agent team on the side. I thought that was really cool. Janet Van Dyne is in this, which is another character that I think doesn't get used enough, and I love Janet Van Dyne, as you will come to see later in the year. I just thought this was a fun-ass book, and the art is good. You get to see a lot of cool powers and interactions and how characters deal with magic and psychic attacks, and I just thought it was great. Next up, we have another Marvel Voices, the indigenous voices here, and I will tell you, I remember nothing about this anthology. So yeah, I'm just gonna give it a B tier, because I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. Basically, I have like no strong connection to indigenous characters. I just bought it to see what the vibe was gonna be about. I liked it for what it was, but it didn't blow me away. Okay, now we're on to a real heavy hitter. Static Shadows of Dakota was the next thing I read that year, or this year. Oh my goodness, already speaking in past. And this is S tier with a, oh my god, like so S tier. If you like Static Shock at all, you need to read this Static series. Nicholas Draper Ivy, I think Vida Ayala. This creative team is amazing. They have done amazing work with Shadows of Dakota. I made a video on it. I loved it. Everything except I think the final issue was just like perfect. And even the final issue, I was like, you know what, I give it a pass, because this was like so good up until then. And people, you need to go out and buy this book. You need to read it. If you're a Static fan at all, you need to get on this. The art style elevated comic book art in a way that I didn't think could be done. Like, I thought we had, you know, kind of reached the peak of art, I guess. with comic books, and we would just get variations of the standard style nowadays, but this really pushed it forward with the visuals. It takes elements of manga, it takes elements of manhwa, especially the coloring style, and it really elevates those action scenes. It feels like I'm watching a show at times. Like, the action is so good, so easy to follow, and so dynamic. I just think everything, the reimaginings of the characters in their place, Iban being reframed as an anti-hero who just is fed up with society, like a true anti-hero. He's really fed up with society and as a whole is still relatable to so many people, and he doesn't truly believe in people, and he's willing to kill them to get what he wants. It's very just like thought-provoking, and I love it. I love this book. I cannot recommend it enough. That's why it's going to be S tier, and this is probably going to be at the top of S tier. I don't think it's going to move, but we've got more books, so let's get going. Okay, so next up is Blade, Volume 1, 2023. This was a read that was just perfect for me. We get Blade getting more vampiric powers. It is everything I wanted to see for Blade. It feels like you're like reading a movie. I think if you're a Blade fan or you're interested in the character, you're gonna love it. Gets a strong recommendation from me. Next up is Children of the Vault, and this is gonna be my first C tier. Now let me explain, because this isn't actually a bad book. I think you could even say Thunderbolts has more problems than Children of the Vault. But the problem with Children of the Vault is, in isolation, it's definitely a book you could skip, and it is literally a product of its time. It is only relevant during the Gregorian era, even then not that relevant, and probably won't be referenced in the future going forward. And now that we're out of the Gregorian era, I think the book has even like less value at this point. It's really just going to be something to read if you're really in the Gregorian era and you just want to read everything it has to offer, because the story is not groundbreaking. It's not anything to write home about. It's kind of forgettable, but it's not bad. It just has problems, and I think you can understand why this will be my first C tier. Next up is Static Up All Night, which I will say has the worst cover art. I don't know why Static looks non-binary in this cover art. And I don't mean to roast the artist that hard. The art in this book is actually not bad, but if this sold poorly, it's because of this cover. This cover to a Static fan would not be something they would pick up. It's very, and I hate using these terms as part of the LGBT community. This is a very woke looking cover. It's very off-putting to me, but I bought it and I do not regret it. And there's a reason I put it in S tier. So this is exactly like a continuation of the Static animated cartoon series, and I think it is intended to take place in the animated cartoon universe. A lot of the portrayals of the characters are very much reminiscent of the animated cartoon series. It is an Elseworlds title, that wasn't obvious, and it is standalone. You get a whole complete story. It feels like an episode of the cartoon. It introduces like, I think, one new character, and then you get Rocket, who I don't think was in the original cartoon, but she shows up here, and it's a very fun read, very much like Static's classic teenage like antics. He's still trying to like grow as a person and find himself, having girl trouble. If you like the cartoon, you're gonna love this book, and do not let the title put you off. And I will say again, the art style past the title is a little bit better, but it's just that title art, and it's like, I don't know why they did that. It's like, did they make this to try to only attract women? I'm like, Static's already niche, and then you want a Static series tailored towards women, but it's not tailored. It's like literally a book for anybody. But I don't know. It's a weird, but it's an S tier. Go read it. Okay, next up is Green Lantern Horatius. So I'm gonna put this in perfect for me, but I'm gonna put it high A tier. So obviously, if you've watched my last couple videos, I've been talking about Green Lantern a lot. I made 2 videos about John Stewart, and most of those came from parts of Horatius. This was a really good read, over 300 pages of Green Lantern lore-defining events that will still be relevant for several years to come. The current running Green Lantern still references events in this book. If you're interested in Green Lantern, you need to read this. It is non-negotiable. You should just do it. All right, moving on. Next up is I Am Batman. Has problem. Okay, problem with I Am Batman is I don't remember a single thing that happened in this book, and I definitely did read it. Okay, I was actually skeptical if I read it, but I just checked and I got to the end of the series. So the art in this is good. Luke Fox as a character is, Sorry, Jace Fox. Oh my god, I even said the wrong name. He's a character I want to like, and I really just don't. This comic is written like a regular Batman comic, like, so it feels like this is Jace having his full bearings, but it also, it feels like an alternate reality in a bad way. Like, this feels like an established Batman story, but they haven't proven that Jace Fox as Batman even works to me. I think that's the problem. Whereas Wakanda feels like an alternate universe where everything works and all the stories are great, just set in Africa with African characters. This Batman series feels like a Batman story where they assume you already like Jace Fox Batman and they're not trying to sell you. This is like a very mid-tier Batman work, made even worse by the fact that it's a Batman that I do not like. So we're gonna put that in has problems. Next up, we have Justice Society of America. Now, I'm gonna get some hate for this. Don't buy this. I hate it. I hate it. I am one of the negative reviews on Amazon. This book has reviewed very well. And let me explain why I hate it. Because the ideas in this book are very good. The ideas in this book are very good. The problem I have with this book is that nothing happens. And that so far, current day, which is December 2024, this book is still irrelevant. Nothing in DC is going on with the Justice Society. You get this whole book, 177 pages, just for the Justice Society to like not even be fully formed at the end. I legitimately felt like I wasted my time and my money. The book starts with this promise that you'll get a Justice Society with Solomon Grundy and the freaking Ghost guy, basically made up of all these villains. That's like the promise on the front of the box. And by the end of the story, that hasn't even happened yet. This is basically like a setup for the sprawling epic that I don't even know if it will get finished. So this is why I put the parentheses, unless the story continues. Like, just don't buy this, because all you're left with is a bunch of really good ideas that haven't gone anywhere yet and aren't necessarily going anywhere. And this is the type of book that if you've never read a comic, I think it will make you not like comics and not want to read them, because this is the type of book that I used to buy and read a long time ago and thought that comics weren't for me. So let me explain on that further, because again, this is a well-reviewed book, so you need to understand why I'm giving it such a bad review here. Okay, so if you don't read comic, right, a lot of people feel like they have to read so much more information around the comic, and they feel like the stories never end. In some ways that's true, and in some ways it isn't. When I buy a volume of a story, volumes are usually 6 issues, and they usually have a complete story arc. That means they have a beginning, a middle, and an end within 6 issues. Now, that doesn't mean the entire story is resolved. There may still be some dangling plot threads, but when you read a volume, generally you get a full story arc. And this is true. This is not a debate. If you're in the comics saying, oh no, you don't get a full story arc in 6 issues, you don't read enough comics, you're just wrong. This is one of the books where if you read all 6 issues, you do not get a full story arc. The story is unresolved at the end. 177 pages, story is unresolved. And when you're deep into the hobby, you can tolerate that, especially by a creator like Geoff Johns. Most people believe he'll finish this. I, on the other hand, I'm not necessarily sure, but a lot of people who read Geoff Johns, they already back him. But again, if you're coming into this brand new, I think this would turn you off comics. So I don't recommend you buy this book. Not at the start, but maybe my recommendation might change if we get a volume 2 that does complete the arc, because it is a very, very good premise. I'll say that. And the art is good. Everything about it is well constructed. It's just unfinished, and I don't think people should be spending their money on an unfinished product. And I think that's enough explanation on that. Next up, we have Black Panther Volume 1. And this was a perfect story for me. So this is the first Black Panther by Eve Ewing, who's a writer I love as well. And this is Black Panther when he has given up his vibranium suit and he has less resources, and it becomes basically a street level hero. And I feel like this story is expertly done. It definitely does feel like Black Panther gets his Batman moment, and it is a very fun read for anyone interested in Black Panther. I would highly recommend it, especially if you want to see Black Panther being more resourceful, because he can't just rely on his ultra powerful suit. After that, we have a Jed MacKay book, and let me tell you, Jed MacKay has quickly become one of my favorite writers at Marvel, and this, we're gonna put this at top of A tier. Still don't think it's for everybody, but Avengers by Jed MacKay, and this is 2023 to 2024, so still ongoing. This is a great read. This, similar to Justice Society, has some dangling plot threads, but its main plot thread does get wrapped up in here, so it does still get my recommendation. We also get a great issue of the Twilight Court, which is I think a 0 issue with King the Conqueror versus the Twilight Court, which by itself is one of the best stories for King the Conqueror I have read. I'm tempted to put this in S tier just because of that King the Conqueror story. It was so good. I sent my good friend a very long text message about it because it was just a very amazing 30 pages or so. But yes, the Twilight Court is the perfect foil to the Avengers. They are basically based off of the Knights of the Round, Merlin's Round Table, Lancelot, and all that, and they have powers that parallel the Avengers' powers in different ways, and the imagery is just amazing. The fights are cool and dynamic, and there are lots of fights. I love fights in my comic. There's less fighting in comics than you think sometimes. Like, you know, a lot of people who read manga think, oh, mangas are just like comics. Comics are all about the fights, and not really. Fighting is less important in American comics than it is in manga, where every aspect of a fight is dialed in and focused on. That's not really how it is in comics, but in this comic in particular, there is a lot of fight exploration, and it feels like manga fight at some times. It's very good, very fun. I think if you enjoy the Avengers at all, you're gonna love that book. Jed MacKay did not miss here. Next up, Monica Rambeau Photon. Okay, Photon is going to be a high C. And this is just to show you that even though I like certain writers, I don't love everything they put out. And you're going to see that again as we go in a little bit deeper here and get to some of these other books. But yeah, Photon, I had some issues with. For one, I believe Spectrum is just the better name for the character, and it better encompasses all of her abilities, and I kind of wish she just kept the name Spectrum. Calling her Photon only references that she can turn into light, which is not all she can turn into. She can turn into like literally anything. So Spectrum was a better name, but obviously I'm not rating the book just on the name of the character. This book implied that Photon was a mutant without actually giving us full confirmation, and it was written in a way that they can hand wave it away and ignore it if going forward if they want to, because they never actually say the word mutant in the story. And I just find it to be a really frustrating nothing burger of a book when you do something like that, because you literally leave it up to other writers to confirm or deny. But if you had just used the words mutant, it would have established this book into history as, hey, this is Monica Rambeau confirming she's a mutant. But to this day, you could have people who could deny that, and they wouldn't necessarily be wrong because she never directly said that she was a mutant in this story. This is just a really annoying read for me, and I don't think it did much for Monica Rambeau's character. If you want a Monica Rambeau story, there's just better things to read out there. This screams of Disney cash grab, like they just wanted a Monica Rambeau story out there to match up with a Captain Marvel movie, and it feels like that. Next up, we have one of Jed MacKay's Moon Knights. I think this was the image I was going for, and we're going to put that right here. So this is not the title image for Jed MacKay Volume 5, which is the one I read this year. Volume 5 was amazing. The Jed MacKay Moon Knight run from 2021 to 2023 is a perfect run. It is the perfect Moon Knight series that I have read, and I've since read a lot of Moon Knight stories, and they're all pretty good, but Jed MacKay's is like another level. It establishes the Moon Knight family, and I love like the Bat family. The Midnight Mission is it's a perfect concept. It's just perfect. I love it. I love it. I love it. If you like Moon Knight, you need to read it. Next up, we have X-Men Red by Al Ewing. This is another one that's perfect for me, may not be for everybody. If you like X-Men, I think you'll like this book. Al Ewing at some of his best. It has very consequential stories for the X-Men lore, fights with Storm and Magneto, tons of mutant battles, tons of new mutants, abilities shown off. Storm coming into, like, I say coming into her own character, but she's a very well established character, but like really leveling up Storm as a character. This book is amazing, and I love Al Ewing, so I will always recommend his books because he is next level at writing. That's enough shilling. Let's go to Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters. So this one I read a long time ago, but I decided to include it here because I made a video about it recently, and I did reread it for the video. Okay, I think this is the first one. We'll just do both at the same time. And they're both perfect for me. So this is made by Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray, I believe, are the creative leads on these. I think if you're a fan of the Warren Ellis style of The Authority, you're gonna love Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters. They're very gritty, very mature, and they're a lot of fun. These characters are so cool, so violent. I love it. Next up, we have The Authority. And okay, here's the thing. Should everyone read The Authority? Maybe not, but it's that good. Like, and I think if you read The Authority, you can't deny they just cooked on another level. Like, it's so dark, it's so gritty, it's so over the top violent. It is everything you could want in an adult comic. It doesn't shy away from any topic. It's so political. It is perfection to me. Truly. I truly cannot get enough of The Authority. I just can't. I read so much of it. I think I own every issue now of the whole series. Actually, wait, I think I might be missing like the last 4 or something, but I read them online, but that's just because they're not available on Amazon. But yeah, The Authority is amazeballs. Okay, next up we have another Al Ewing stroke of genius, and that is Avengers Incorporated. My god, Avengers Incorporated. This is the best book nobody read this year. Like, Al Ewing just cooked on this. Like, it is like the perfect mystery story, especially for Avengers fans who like know some classic Avengers lore. It is so fun seeing the Wasp get into this detective mode with the Vision. There's shenanigans with Ultron going on. There is like so much happening in this book, and nobody read it, so I'm gonna take the moment to give it a spotlight. Avengers Incorporated, it's really good. It is a consequential read because I believe there's a new Avengers series that actually I think depends on some of the events that happens in this book. I don't want to get into too many spoilers because it is like literally a mystery series, but it's very cool. It is very cool. I think it will have some long-lasting implications for Avengers going forward, and many people probably just won't read it, but you should. Al Ewing's the GOAT. Best to ever do it. All right, next up is Infamous Iron Man, and I'm gonna get some hate for this. I read this year, and I'm gonna say C has problems. Oh my god, I'm gonna get some hate. Okay, Infamous Iron Man. It's an older book, well established. I wanted to like it more, and I just didn't. This is where we get Doctor Doom as Iron Man. Let me tell you my big problems with it. In this entire book, this is like 300 pages of Doctor Doom being Iron Man. 400 pages Doctor Doom being Iron Man. Doctor Doom probably fights one time as Iron Man, and it's a decently large fight where he captures and imprisons a lot of people. Again, this is an older book, it's spoilers, but it's an older book. You should have read it. It's from like 2016. But yeah, he fights and captures a bunch of prisoners in like one issue, and that's like pretty much the only fight you get. You don't get a ton of explanation about what his suit can do. I was extremely disappointed. The end of the book is horrible, actually. Like, it's actually god awful, and I don't even think, like, if you argue with me that the ending is bad, then you're just looking at nostalgia glasses. Like, the fact that the ending was Mephisto was the villain the whole time when they were framing it as it was gonna be the Maker. It should have been the Maker. Making it Mephisto was stupid, and it didn't really make a lot of sense. It was so dumb. So yeah, that's why I'm giving it a C tier. Alright, we're back at it again. Okay, next up we have Toxic Summer. And we're gonna give that one a don't buy. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I thought it was gonna be more of a full story. It's not really for my age group. Like, this is a young LGBT teen book, and it didn't move me. I'm gonna give it a D. Alright, next up is Astonishing Iceman, and this was great. This is everything I wanted, which is why I feel okay giving another LGBT book a D tier, because this one is perfect. Iceman shows off like new powers in this. He gets to fully live up to being an Omega level, basically establishes the Iceman is like nearly unkillable. It is such a cool book, such a fun read, and I'll say Steve Orlando, he just makes fun comics. Like, I will buy most things from Steve Orlando just because they will be fun. He doesn't write the most thought-provoking work all the time, but I can promise you if he wrote it, it's probably a fun book, and that's high praise. He's a man who will sell me copies. Like, I will buy from Steve Orlando. Alright, next up we have an S tier, and I am so glad that this held up after I read Infamous Iron Man, and that is Iron Man Extremis by Warren Ellis. Obviously, Warren Ellis worked on The Authority, so I was already predisposed to like it, and it did not disappoint. It was one of the most mature Iron Man stories I have read. There's lots of killing in it, lots of sci-fi, thought-provoking stuff that is still having ripple effects to this day in the Marvel Universe. Extremis was defining for that era of comics, and there is a reason it is still talked about to this day, and it does hold up. Go read Extremis if you have not. Next up, Luke Cage Gang War. This is another comic that is unfortunately very forgettable, will not be talked about in a few years. Again, takes place during the era where Luke Cage was mayor and he couldn't operate as freely as he wanted to. For me, it's a fun read. Like, it's a good, solid, fun story. It's just not one that is going to have a lot of reference, a lot of long-standing lifespan. You know, there's not going to be a lot of talk about it in the future, but there's nothing wrong with it. Next up is DC Pride 2024, and when I said I buy all these anthologies every year, I meant it. It's fine, nothing to write home about. Very B tier, very forgettable. I don't even think I had a favorite story in it this time, but I also can't say that any of them were particularly bad, so we're gonna leave it where it's at. Okay, next up, Robin Mystery at the Marina. Oh my god, this is like peak don't buy. I just don't buy it. It's so horrible. It's so horrible. I have never seen a book with an art style that disgusted me so much that I couldn't even read the story. I straight up, the art style was such a miss. Don't let the cover fool you. Tim Drake looks insane, like a blob human in this book, and it is so distracting. It made it impossible for me to read it. When other characters show up, they look so off model that I can't tell who they are until they say it like deep into the story. It's awful. It is awful. They should not have made it. I can't even talk about the quality of the writing because I couldn't finish reading it because it's just it's so visually atrocious. I hate it with every fiber of my being. All right, next up, X-Men Battle of the Atom. I read that this year because I was making my Iceman video, and it was solid. No complaints. It's not that deep. It has a story about some future X-Men. The portrayals of the X-Men from the future were cool. It was a fun read. It was perfect for me. Definitely my style of book. Next up is another Jeff Johns series, Justice Society: The Next Stage, and I thought it was good. I think for some people it could be an A tier. For me, it just feels a little dated, which is like, okay. It just doesn't have me foaming at the mouth or anything. These next couple are gonna be quick. Batman Incorporated Volume 2 has problems. The character designs in there, I don't like. Story, kind of weak. It just doesn't have a strong recommendation for me. Unless you're just like a crazy fan of Batman Incorporated in those awful looking suits, I don't think there's much for you. X-Men The Wedding Special is S tier. Everybody should read it. Mystique and Destiny finally get married on panel. It's amazing. It's a historical moment. It's beautiful. Seeing their love story come together over the years and finally get its own issue to commemorate it. I think everybody can see why it's an important story. I think you should read it. It's very sweet. It's very in character for the characters. There's a little like heist thing going on for Mystique, going back to her villain roots. It's so fun. I love it. Next up is Hulkling and Wiccan. Good, but not great. I think it's one of the first outings with Peach Momoko, who is a writer that seems like they're coming up a bit in the Marvel space, at least. It's a good read. No, not a lot of complaints. Just, I don't think you have to read it. I think there are other good Hulkling and Wiccan stories than this one, but it's not bad. All right, this is another old one that I reread for a video, and it's gonna be Iceman, and yeah, I'm putting this up here. I really like Iceman Volume 1 Thawing Out from 2017. Y'all should read the whole series. It's his first solo series since coming out, and it was a perfect solo series. Iceman can hold down a solo story. His powers are so interesting and fun to watch. He can handle almost any threat, so you can really get some difficult villains in there, and it's pretty believable that he can take them on by himself. He's just a cool, quippy character. You can see why they paired him up with Spider-Man on TV. Like, it's a good read. It's a good fun time. After that, we got Deadpool Marks for Money, which I want to put between A and B. It's a really good read for me. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in B tier just to fill it out. I thought it was fun, but I also think you don't need to read it, but I also think you don't need to read any Deadpool really, but Deadpool's still fun to read. So hey, if you just want to see Deadpool have his own super team of misfits, go ahead and read Mercs for Money. It's a fun time. Next up is a book I was surprised was so good, and that is Deadpool versus Black Panther, which is a matchup I never even thought about, but it just shows you like Black Panther really is that guy because he dominates Deadpool in this. So yeah, I am spoiling it, but you should really read it for yourself because it is crazy, this matchup. And I really like that he dominates Deadpool because that's how the fight would go in my head as well. And he does use some technology that I think comes up in later series that comes from this book. So I think it did have some little implications for Marvel going forward. So I don't know. Either way though, it's a good standalone story. It's very good. Better than I expected. Okay, next we have to talk about the Asiri series, and we are gonna put all of these in must read. So this is the Roye Okupe rabbit hole that I got into this year. Roye Okupe is a Nigerian author who has his own universe called the Unique Universe, and his comics are so good. I cannot explain to you how good they are. That you just have to read them. This one is about a far-flung future where humans have ascended to a level of godhood. Some of them have ascended to a level of godhood using sci-fi technology, and they have like an intergalactic empire. Think intergalactic empire of Wakanda, but this is just a future Africa kind of version, and some of the characters have godly powers. It is very cool, very fun. You should read this. Next we'll talk about EXO, which is the start of his superhero universe. It is a very well done superhero origin story, and he's basically the universe's Iron Man. Malika Warrior Queen is the universe's Wonder Woman, and the Windmaker is definitely not as strong as a Superman, but he's up there. It's a good story. All of these are good stories. You need to go read them. Roye Okupe's Justice League, the Aloris, is such a good read. If you you have any interest in superheroes and want to see what superheroes from a different culture would be like, I strongly recommend you go pick up his books. Next up, we have The Uncanny Avengers, which was surprisingly good for me. I think a lot of people could put this reasonably into a B tier, but I had no expectations of this being particularly good, and now I'm kind of sad because they will probably never do this team up ever again, because it's very much a product of the Krakoan era. It is part of the fall of Krakoa, and some of the events do lead to that. It is a story that may be forgotten to time, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I strongly recommend you check it out. Almost done here, so we'll go through some of these. These will be quick. So, The Vigil. The Vigil has... I'm gonna put Vigil in D tier. Vigil, it's a good story, but it needs more, and I don't think it's gonna get it, so I would just say don't buy it. Basically, this is an original super team of, I would call them super spies as opposed to traditional heroes. Their powers are a bit less effective than most hero teams. And the premise is interesting, but I feel like I've seen better, and it would just need more issues for me to recommend it. Next up is City Boy. City Boy is like a reimagining of Hawksmoor from The Authority. I don't think we're ever going to get other books from him, so I don't recommend you read it unless he becomes a bigger character. His first outing, it was pretty forgettable. It's nothing to write home about. Moving on. Next up, Green Lantern War Journal. Green Lantern War Journal was a great read. I'll say it was an unfinished story, which I did criticize before, but unlike that other story, this one already has a volume 2 that's coming out, so this is good. I did read Blade Volume 2, it would get A tier as well as Vengeance of Moon Knight would also get A tier. Since those are part of other comics, we're just not going to place them on the tier list. Next up, we have Doom 2024 number 1. Great read, great little comic, seeing solo Doctor Doom in the future seems awesome, and I think he is getting his own solo series after that. Defenders Beyond, I have problems with it. It's not much of a story as much as it is just redefining the cosmic hierarchy and this team. The team is kind of pointless because they're going up against god level characters that they really can't even interact with, and like one of the characters has to get buffed into the Phoenix for the plot just for stuff to happen. I was not impressed. This is not Al Ewing's best work. Honestly, I probably don't even recommend you read it, but it's not getting more issues, so I don't feel like I need to put it in don't buy. But I mean, if you care about the Marvel cosmic hierarchy, maybe that would be the reason to read it, but I don't. So I'm skipping that one. Next is Night Thrasher. Night Thrasher was good, but it's a very skippable series. I think if you had some previous care for Night Thrasher, you might enjoy it. It is built up a lot off of his older works that I haven't read, so I may feel less strongly about that because I haven't read his older works. But again, if you feel like you need to read the older works, maybe the work isn't just that good on its own. So yeah. Oh, I read Earth 2 Society, and this has problems. The premise of Earth 2 was so good. Initially, the idea was to have a trinity that wasn't Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and they, as you can probably tell from the cover, they dropped that premise, and it became something completely different that was way less interesting to me. It was very sad to see such a good premise get destroyed because they couldn't commit to it. Next, we have Alan Scott Green Lantern. I'll put that there. It's a good read. I think how much you relate to the LGBT community is going to depend how much you like it. It's decent. It does feel like a product of maybe an older time, an older view of life. I think maybe that's why I don't like it more, but it's a solid read. I think people in the community will understand it, but I don't think if you're outside of the community, you're not really going to get what all the hype was about. So, you know, maybe stay away if it's not your cup of tea. I did read Wolverine versus Blade, which I think is that's what I intended that to be. I don't know if that was the actual cover, but that was great. No explanation. Wolverine versus Blade. You can see why it's good. I read the Blade Omnibus, and boy, those old Blade comics were really freaking good. Like, very surprised how good they were and how well they held up. I actually like Blade even more as a character reading his old stuff before he was the character he is today. I think he had like a lot of personality back in the day, and yeah, Blade's cool. Also read some of the Moon Knight Omnibus, and that was solid. I did not read the entire Omnibus. I think I read 90% of the Blade Omnibus. Moon Knight Omnibus still need to work through, but what I read was good. And we'll start with Booster Gold. Had some problems, most of them being I'm not a big Booster Gold fan, and I did not care about that book. And if it couldn't get me to care, it had some problems. All right, last but not least, New Avengers by Al Ewing, an older title. This is not Al Ewing's best work. It's not his strongest, but boy, was it a fun little read. We'll put that in A tier and we'll leave it off there. So yeah, this is what I read this year. My strongest recommendations are in the S tier. If you like my taste, check out my A tier, and everything else, read at your own risk. If you like this video, thanks for watching, and I plan to do it again next year. So we'll see how that goes. Thanks for stopping by.